Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Coaching Edge. I hope you're having a great day and that everything's going your way. Today, I want to talk a little bit about cycles and how do you break cycles. And you may be asking yourself, well, what do you mean by a cycle? I mean cycles in life, cycles in families. Maybe, for example, give you a couple different ones. Say, for example, your father is a plumber and you're going to be a plumber. That would be like a cycle, or the father is a plumber, the son wants to become a plumber. My question is that really what the son wants to do? Does he really want to be a plumber, or is he just following along with what dad says or what his mom says he should do? I guess that's one way of looking at a cycle. Because, if the son becomes a plumber, will his kids become plumbers? Is that what God had meant them to do? Is that what they're destined to do in life? Maybe, maybe not. How do we know if we don't search for that or seek that out, I guess is what I'm saying. Other ways I think of cycles are like when you have families of, maybe you have alcoholics in the family. The mom was an alcoholic. The daughter was an alcoholic, and now the daughter's daughter is an alcoholic. A lot of times people say, it runs in families or it's hereditary, so to speak. I beg to differ. I mean, I think there could be some hereditary stuff there, but I also believe it's just learned behaviors on how to deal with things. So I guess, that would be considered a cycle. There's a cycle of alcoholism in the family. Maybe there's a cycle of a family that, they've just always lived in poverty, or maybe they've always lived on the government. Maybe, they've always been on food stamps. Their grandma was on food stamps, the mom was on food stamps, the daughter's on food stamps. Maybe it's a cycle like that. I'm just kind of giving you examples of what would be like a cycle. Maybe a cycle of brokenness. Maybe someone, their family was involved in crime, and they've always been involved in crime, and whether it be their uncle, their father, their grandfather, they're just, basically commit crimes just like their relatives did. Maybe, that would be a cycle as well. Well, what I want to talk about today is how do you break that cycle? Probably more of a cycle that's in a negative way, or maybe one that's not necessarily a healthy way is what I want to talk about today. A little different than the job situation maybe I mentioned, but similarly, that's a cycle. And I think a person that, is going to follow in a parent's career path, they really need to take a look at themselves and ask themselves if that's really what they want to do. Because I believe we're all individuals, and basically God has a plan for us. And it's like, are we following God's plan by following in our parents' footsteps? That's a question I can't answer for you, but definitely one that you want to consider. But, getting back to the brokenness, and I think a lot of this goes back to, how do you beat the cycle, or how do you challenge that cycle or look for that? And I think the key is you need to seek the truth in your past. You got to look back. Maybe someone you trusted told you something that is not true at all. And you need to be willing to go back in the past and look at that and realize, hey, wait a minute, they told me when I was a young person, maybe I didn't quite understand things like I do now. So I think that's why it's important to visit the past. And you have to ask yourself, did that person tell me the truth? Was that truthful with what they said? Is the way it is? Many times I think we're, as young people, and I myself included, when I was a youth, I listened to people I trusted and religiously listened to them, and it became part of my belief system. Well, you have to, as you get older, you need to challenge your belief system a little bit and ask yourself, was really what I was taught the truth? Many times I don't believe it is the truth. It just all depends, depends on the situation. But I think you need to challenge your belief system a little bit. I think that's part of a way you can break the cycle. you got to look at it and say, hey, look, just because my dad was an alcoholic doesn't mean that I need to be one. And you need to take a look at that and challenge yourself and, really look at the root cause. Well, why was my dad an alcoholic, for an example? My dad wasn't an alcoholic, by the way, but I'm just using this as an example. Maybe he was an alcoholic because he didn't know how to deal with his problems. He looked outside of himself for ways to escape his problems and issues, so he turned to alcohol. Instead of dealing with the problems, talking to somebody, getting it out in the air and airing it out, dealing with his hurts. Because, like I said, hurt people. I've said that a lot in the past, and even in this case it applies, because the dad turned to alcohol. Is he hurting his family? Is he hurting his kids by doing that? Yeah, he could very well be. Maybe he's not present at sporting events or school events. Maybe the dad's one of those abusive alcoholics who becomes violent, and they beat the wife and kids. Once again, he's taking his hurts out on somebody else. That doesn't mean that you have to be that alcoholic. You have to maybe deal with things differently. And that's where like I said, you have to challenge your beliefs and what you've seen and witnessed as you grew up. And hopefully you learned some lessons along the way. And you told yourself, I'm not going to be that way. Because just because your parents said something or did something doesn't make it right or mean it was the truth. You have to realize that and go back and look at those situations. I mean, there's many things, I think back to my youth that maybe what I was told wasn't exactly accurate. Believe me, I believe my parents did the best they could, and I forgive them for any, mistakes that they maybe made or didn't understand themselves. That's part of life and journey. I forgive them for those, and you have to be able to do that too. But like I said, you really need to challenge some of those beliefs that you had as a child that maybe weren't true. You weren't told or taught right. So you have to take a look at those situations. Now, and that's where you have to trust your intuition and trust God a lot with that, guiding you on that when you look back on that stuff. One thing, just to kind of give you an example of my past, and I know my parents were really big on you have to clean your plate when you eat at supper time. Lunchtime, you should always eat all the food on your plate. Well, my parents were from an older generation. Well, back in the day, they only had one meal, one course meal, and you did clean your plate, that was just it. But now, you have 3 different things on your plate. You're told to clean your plate, and I clean my plate. Well, I listened and believed that. And at the same time, guess what? I was kind of a heavier kid. I put on some weight. And I'm not blaming my parents. They told me that, you should clean your plate. But the reality of it is I probably shouldn't have cleaned my plate. I should have set some things aside, not eaten things that maybe weren't healthy for me, and made some better choices on that. I'm not blaming my parents because that's the way they were raised, but does it mean it was the right thing to do? Not necessarily. I don't think so. Do I think kids should eat a good square meal at supper time? Yep, definitely. They should try a little of everything. Doesn't mean they have to clean their plate. I mean, if they're full, they're full. Like I said, I dealt with a lot of obesity when I was younger. And even it took me into adulthood because I got so used to cleaning my plate when I probably shouldn't have did that. And, like I said, you have to challenge that way of thinking and that belief from the past. And that'd be kind of an example of, breaking that cycle of, in this case, maybe I want to be a little skinnier, lose some weight, that type of thing. So that way you don't continue on that same path. So it's important to seek the truth. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit with breaking cycles is, do excuses hold you back from trying and changing? Do you make excuses on why things are the way they are instead of making a change? Maybe nobody let's give you another example. Say your family, nobody's went to college, and you kind of look at it and say, well, I don't need to go to college, and none of my other family members went. Well, maybe you should challenge that a little bit and say, you know what, there's some things I'd really like to do, and you know what, I wouldn't like to struggle financially like my family has over the years. Maybe I should become something or do something I really am passionate about where I can make a little more money. And I think that's where you need to take a look at that and break that cycle of, hey, you can just stay home and go to work every day. Once you turn 18, graduate from school. If you graduate from school, you're gonna work in a factory down the street. Maybe you need to challenge that a little bit and say, hey, you know what? I've got a burning desire to help people in the medical field. I'd really like to go to medical school or become a pediatrician. Maybe, you've got the grades and that's something you want to do, but yet you feel like your family's forcing you, hey, you need to go down and work in the factory. You need to join the family business in this. I think it's important to follow your passions and, break the cycle of doing what everybody else did. It's okay to be a little different and go a different direction, especially if it's a positive direction and you can make a difference in other people's lives. So with that being said, and kind of summarize all this up a little bit, I know there's a lot of cycles of brokenness out there and it gets passed from one generation to the next. It does not have to be that way at all. Like I said, people need to challenge some of their former beliefs, look at their past a little bit and maybe look at it with new eyes and realize that, hey, just because your parents did it that way doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. And you have to realize that you can make changes and break the cycle. Don't leave it up to somebody else. Nobody else is going to break it. You have to break it, and that's by you making changes. It starts with you looking at your past, maybe looking at things with some different new eyes and discovering that maybe there's some bigger plans for you than what everybody else has planned for you. That does happen in life because people put a lot of expectations on us, especially when you're younger, that, hey, you should do this. And the reality is you need to do what God wants you to do in life, and maybe that's something totally different than what the people that well have planned for you. So keep that in mind. Break the cycle. It can be done. It doesn't have to be done the same way. And like I said, just because your parents did something a certain way doesn't mean that you have to take everything you learned, but you gotta, like I said, as you get older, you need to revisit the past and make sure that you were told some truths and not stuff that was not true, just because you believe somebody so much because they were close to you and you loved them so much. So that does happen, but like I said, you have to be forgiving of people that maybe misled you a little bit, and that does happen. Even our parents do that, so keep that in mind. That's what I do here at the Coaching Edge. I like to help people work through some issues, and I just want to say, cycles can be broken, and, each situation's a little bit different, but that's something that I can help you here with at the Coaching Edge. Give me an email, give me a message if it's something that you would like some coaching on and some help with. Hey, thanks for listening today. Take care, my friends. We'll talk again soon. God bless. Bye.